our head of engineering says that only AI native companies can build AI native software. And so, we from the ground up have built and rebuilt our engineering team and infrastructure to effectively be building software using AI. So, we very heavily use agentic loop, the agentic factory to build software. And so we're a lot faster at building software. It's a lot more reliable. We're shipping every single day new capabilities, new features into production. And so it's a lot faster.
Welcome to another episode of SaaS Scaled. I have a guest today, Alex, and he has had great experience, good exit, very impressive, also a very impressive company that he co-founded afterward and he's managing now. There are a lot to talk about. I will start with the introduction. Alex will do a better job than me to introduce himself, tell you about the background of himself and the company. Please, go ahead.
Happy to. So first of all, Armin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on your program. So a little bit about me and a little bit about Levelpath. So, I have been in the enterprise SaaS space from the beginning of my career, which has been about 24 years now, and working with the same co-founder, Stan. We actually started in online ordering for large restaurant chains and built a really big business doing that. Our customers were like Applebee's, Outback, Carrabba's, Roundtable, Togo's, Jersey Mike's, etc. Papa John's, KFC, you name it. And so we started serving enterprises very early on. That company grew really quickly and then was acquired. And we loved everything about that experience. It was really, really fun, except for all of the RFPs that we had to answer. And that's how we got into procurement. We built a company called Scout RFP just to make RFPs easier for procurement. And before we did anything, we went and spoke to hundreds of people in procurement just to understand, like, what did they do? What was their life like? And so we made it really easy. That company grew really quickly and was acquired by Workday. And then I became the GM of spend management at Workday and was at Workday for a while running that. That grew really quickly as well. And then we left to go and start Levelpath. And we'll spend time talking about Levelpath here. But the whole idea is like procurement is our passion. It's the thing that we've been doing for well over a decade. We love it. And, we said that AI wave, everything is changing. And so for us, it's like, how do we help our customers move into the future there?
It was a very well-known category when you started the company, right? So I know some companies doing procurement kind of, automation for decades. So What was the reason that you said, I'm going to start and it will be different? And obviously you have been very successful. So you definitely have differentiated yourself somehow.
Yes.
Can you explain to us how did you do it and what was that kind of differentiation factor?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so, you're right. The space has been around for a very, very long time. I mean, even, Ariba is like pretty well known, which is now owned by SAP. And that was a company in the 90s. Even before then, there was, procurement software. So procurement, of course, has been around for forever. Using software to manage procurement has been around for forever. And then after cloud came out, there was Coupa really like excelled at bringing procurement into a native enterprise SaaS like cloud type of environment. And since then, it really, that has been more or less what companies have, startups have iterated on, including Scout RFP. We really stood on the shoulders of Ariba and Coupa. We were a cloud native application. We were just, our whole thing was like, we're just going to make it really easy to use. Whereas a lot of the big suite providers were pretty, didn't focus on sourcing or were hard to use. And so, but we didn't fundamentally change how procurement was done or what procurement was doing. We just made it, approachable. We democratized these tools that oftentimes were either really expensive or not approachable or hard to use. But in the last few years, there's a clear, and I mean, as you've seen in all of your interviews, there's a clear platform shift, very similar to how either, the very first one with the internet or when everybody went to cloud. It's a tremendous, tremendous shift, which means that customers are all looking to navigate how do we move into the future. And the premise behind Levelpath is very simple. It is you're now able to bring reasoning into software, reasoning that wasn't available before. This is AI, the LLMs. And so that is fundamentally transforming how our customers use software and what they use software for. And so Levelpath is at the forefront of helping our customers transform their organizations in using AI to automate the function, not just bring better tools in and how they use it, but really like reimagine the function from the ground up.
And you mentioned AI. I know that AI is a very kind of one of the main ingredients in what you are making over there. How do you see this is really helping you, from what aspect, and how does it help you to build the software? Also, how does it help your users and customers to really do what they do more intelligently and faster? If you could talk a little bit about the benefits that AI brings on both sides of the table, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, our head of engineering says that only AI native companies can build AI native software. Mm-hmm. And so, we from the ground up have built and rebuilt our engineering team and infrastructure to effectively be building software using AI. So, we very heavily use agentic loop, the agentic factory to build software. And so we're a lot faster at building software. It's a lot more reliable. We're shipping every single day new capabilities, new features into production. And so it's a lot faster. That's on the internal side. We're using AI in every part of our process to build the software, which is very different than the way that software has been built for the last 50 years, 60 years, you name it. So that part continues to transform, but fundamentally, we made that switch early and believe that is the future and how architecture needs to be built. On our customer side, they're doing the same thing, except for their product is how the organization is built. So how the process of when a request comes in for procurement, I want to buy something from anyone, to that product or service being delivered. And how do you do all of the work streams that go in there? And there's a lot. And the larger, our customers are very large. So the bigger you get, the more complicated that is, and the more that is introduced into that process. So when you're bigger, you have multiple risk reviews that are happening, whether it be financial, cyber, et cetera. You have supplier onboarding that's happening, which is a pretty big process altogether. You have different systems, whether it be like financial systems and getting budgeting approved ahead of time, or and then at the end when you want to tie off and make sure that the product or service has been delivered. You get it. There's a lot of systems and processes that go in order to run procurement. And so historically, this has been a very manual process, and lots of different tools brought in throughout the process to help the manual process happen. What our customers are working to do is try to make that process as autonomous as possible. And that doesn't mean move humans out of the loop completely, but it does mean in areas where humans slow the process down, how do you bring in automation, reasoning to close those bottlenecks as much as possible, reduce those bottlenecks as much as possible?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So in the past, even not very, very past, we are talking about even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that's around the time that you guys started. Yeah. If you go back 5 years ago, there was software and there was data. Everybody was trying to really handle the data much better and do some automations with software. And that was, if you are very smart in building a software that works well with data, then you had a good package application to offer, right? Yeah. Now, then AI started as a third component. So now you have AI, you have software, you have data. And what software does is what software does, right? So you write the software and then AI is the model is the trained model, that you have the LLMs, you have everything that is the intelligence that really works. It's more similar to or closer to human than closer to software. So even if AI is built by software technology, but the similarities between AI and human to me is more than the similarities between AI and software. And then of course, data is the third part that empowers both, the AI and software. Now, companies that do well with these three components really understand how the software needs to be designed to empower AI, how AI needs to empower software,
Yes.
data. These three components is harmoniously work well together. That's the new paradigm. And as you said, there are some companies who may not get it and still live in the old days of software and data and ignore the AI side, or the AI is not that important to them, or they don't know how to integrate it. They may not be on par with the companies that actually harmoniously really integrate all three components: software, AI, and data. You mentioned a very good term that was autonomous. And you said you make, things to be more autonomous. And that way you
Yep.
are saving their time. It's easier, it's faster for them with less resources. They can get things done. Do you think that in general, the software industry going through that process, that the more software applications become autonomous, they are the ones that will be successful ones in the future?
I think I would break that into two questions. The first question is what does autonomous mean? And so Dario Amodei from Anthropic, he talks about like and you hear Jensen Huang talk about this too, where there's a tower of geniuses, and the whole idea is like if every company, if every individual had like a tower of geniuses at their disposal, well, how would the future change? How would companies change? How would you change personally? What would the world look like? What impact does it have on healthcare? What impact does it have on procurement and finance and all of that? And so when we talk about automation at Levelpath, sure, there's like automation in terms of it's different systems connecting to one another, conditionals, like logic happening, things that you really didn't need AI for in the past. But there's a different part to it as well, which is reasoning. And that's the part that I think is the real unlock for enterprises is you now have the ability to not just have automation, but you also have reasoning built right into those workflows. And I think that's the part that is really interesting to explore for our companies is where before you had to really lean on humans for that reasoning, and you had to lean on humans for judgment, and you had to lean on humans for taste and things like that. In many cases, you can now lean on AI for that. And certainly a lot of people are doing that in their personal life and talking to ChatGPT all the time. But you see increasingly that happening in companies too, where they're providing instructions in the form of prompts, very detailed prompts, to LLMs, to these reasoning engines. And there's a harness in place. There's safeguards, there's all of the parts that go in there. And that harness also includes like what context is brought in, to your point, what data is brought into those decision-making processes. Very similar to with humans. But if you're doing that, you effectively have a system that's always on, that's able to not just like automate the simple stuff, but is able to really like automate a lot of the things that before you had to lean on people for the reasoning part. And so that's the real unlock that is new to software. And so your question about like, is autonomous software the future? I think absolutely the answer to that is yes. And the reason for that is for the fact that you could now bring reasoning into the equation, whereas before, it was really just you had if then logic.
Yeah. So I think that the starting point that we as human brought a kind of, I think, intelligence to the equation was when we probably invented transistors. And that was the time that, it was the decision involved, right? So it was electricity going one way, and depending on the other route, you could say 1 or 0. And that creation of 1 and 0 started really bringing the decision to kind of our world. And then the software started coming with more comprehensive software. And then we named the smart software kind of, smart devices, everything. But I think what I get out of your response is that that intelligence level now is going to a totally different level, and applications that are going to offer the higher level of intelligence and being autonomous is one of the benefits, is one of the aspects of it, is going to be the future, because now we are experiencing intelligence at the level that it's very different than what we experienced 5 years or 10 years ago, because software could automate, could get your software smarter. We had, a spreadsheet that could be smart, but not at the level of intelligence that we experience today. That is totally different. Software being smart versus true intelligence, very similar to the intelligence that we have, maybe faster, better, bigger, now can be in place as part of the product.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your comments. If you have anything to add, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, you got it exactly right. It's been an interesting journey too over the last few years, because in the beginning the LLMs were not that good. They weren't that useful. And I would say only about a year ago did they get good enough where they started, particularly in software development, you could offload full like tasks, full features to the agentic loop, and it would be done not just faster, but in many cases better than people would be able to do it. But it does change how you build software, how you do procurement, how everything. And so really we're all going through this journey over the last year on quite a transformational shift.
You categorize your company as a SaaS company, right?
Of course.
Software as a service. Many people there are many people that they really differentiate, build a company that provides software as a service versus some companies that they say, we just provide AI. We don't provide software.
Yeah.
And our kind of service is not software as a service. We are different. Yeah. And some of them even go further and say SaaS is done. There is no other there is no future for SaaS.
Right.
Future belongs to just AI as a service, not software as a service. What's your take on it? How do you feel when you talk to customers, when you go and just tell them that, I have asked that question from some of our customers. I'm very interested to understand what's your take and what's your market's take out of that.
Yeah, well, I hope I don't get into trouble with the VCs or anything like that. The ones that are board. But I mean, it reminds me of the time when, and I think this was brilliant marketing, is when Salesforce had the big signs, in 2000 or whatever, and they would march outside of Oracle and it would say, no software. And they had the big, like red, big red flash through it. And like people would always say like, but isn't Salesforce software? Like, isn't that software too? Like, I don't get it. And of course, Salesforce is software. It's software as a service, and their whole point was like, our software isn't sold in boxes; it's delivered via the cloud. And so, I think the whole like, is SaaS dead? Is SaaS not dead? Debate kind of a little bit moot, because all of us are, charging companies to use our software, and that goes across. Doesn't matter what whether how much AI you use in the software or not. I think that where the difference is that some companies are charging, per outcome, per use, per token type of pricing, whereas other companies are still charging per seat and other companies have some kind of a different model, for using software. I think all of that gets back to value-based pricing and the conversation around that. I think some people are just, the reaction is more like the seat-based model for SaaS was never really great for companies, and
Mhm.
it was always somewhat clumsy. The outcome-based model, or a value-based model, as you put it, like, I would say, does feel better, but only when it is done in a clear and transparent way. Otherwise, it still feels pretty icky. And so there, I think it's, that's the question is, is it SaaS or is it not SaaS? I think it's more like, are we a seat-based pricing or not a seat-based pricing? And so, I think that's like a different question of, is it software that you pay for, or are you paying for services? To the extent some companies are really charging for their software just like they would charge for services. And so there I feel like it would be different. But, I think the vast majority of companies, regardless of how AI native they are still like delivering software, charging for it. I would still consider that SaaS. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I think that
No.
it's a
Yeah.
strong argument.
Makes sense. I think, sometimes people refer to the cases that you are really selling the model that you have trained, not the software that you have developed. And in that case, but I would argue that yes, those are possible, but I don't see how you can one replace the other because each one of them has its own kind of place in the near future, in the midterm. I don't see, how, for example, your software and the function that it serves can be just replaced by a model that the model does everything and people need to use the model. There's no software around it. It's just the LLM, the model that you have built that does it. But if that, was the case, but yeah, so I can see purely AI plays a role in some cases and just purely software plays a role without any need to AI, but also the blend is going to be increasingly the market, the blend of data and AI and software all, working with each other, very orchestrated and bringing the maximum benefit to the customers. At this point, Alex, I wanted to ask a very random question, has nothing to do with the topics we discussed. I wanted to know if, I'm pretty sure you have traveled to many cities and even might be the city you live in that you find it very interesting city. That's the place. I have a cousin who, whenever I ask him, hey, which place do you like to travel? He says, where I am, I love it. I don't want to travel anywhere. I have everything here.
Yeah.
So, but out of all of the cities that you have been there, which city would you recommend if I ask you, give me a city that I can go there and enjoy and relax and stay there for 2 weeks? Is there any city that you would say, oh, you would like this city, go there?
Well, my favorite city in the world is San Francisco. And anybody who knows me knows this. And of course, this is the city I live in. So maybe I agree with your cousin on the, on loving what you are. But I mean, I'll make a strong pitch for, and I'm not from here originally, but I've been here for a very long time, and I know you've lived here too, Armin. And so you
Yes,
understand how gorgeous the Bay Area is,
it is.
and that's the part that I one of the things that I think is just really wonderful. People love the weather. People love how beautiful it is. People love how diverse it is when like from a like geographical, you go anywhere in any direction outside of San Francisco and you have like a different view, basically, whether it be forest um, or beaches or whatever you want. However, the part that I love about San Francisco and what I think like you really feel when you're here is a sense of optimism, a
Mm.
sense of anything is possible. And it's just like part of the atmosphere. And it doesn't matter, and all the like revolutionary like so many revolutionary motions have started here, not just in software, of course, software and technology, of course, technology, but also like, culture and
Yeah.
music and across the board. And so And when you're here, you feel it. You feel it in the architecture, you feel it in the air, you feel it in all the like different neighborhoods and what was all the places where you're like this motion started here and this started here and it's all around you. And so I love this city for that. This city that when you're here, you feel like anything is possible. You see all the driverless cars rolling around, um, and it's like, wow, this is really cool. The only thing I do tell people is living in San Francisco does feel, or being in San Francisco does feel like you're in the future, because everything kind of like starts here first. All the billboards are AI, like all but it's a little buggy, everybody because everybody comes here first to test everything out. You also feel like you're the QA team before, for whatever it is that is being tested, whether it be driverless cars or whatever kind of technology. And so I like that too. But like you go into the airport and you see the robot making your coffee, and you're like, this will work. And if it
Proof
doesn't,
of concept.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. Uh, Now we talked about, the journey that you had at the company and the AI. Uh, One thing I would like to also discuss, you have seen that journey, you have been with different companies. And one thing I would like to really ask you that probably you can have a very good insight about it based on the experiences that you had, is that if a family member come to you today and say, hey, I'm graduating from university, or I'm kind of thinking to start something, from your perspective in the AI age, or even if she or he tells you that I'm going to university and I wanted to see which kind of, what should I even study to make myself ready for this kind of market based on what you have seen around yourself. And you are in the midst of really this kind of AI revolution from your company perspective. You mentioned San Francisco being the place that the POCs are running and everything. And, it's at the kind of cutting edge. What would you recommend to that loved one, the family member, to say, hey, you should really go and just study this to get ready for the future in the next 10 years, or you should go and start this type of companies? What is your recommendation from, where they should position themselves in the future in the coming 10 years?
It's a great question. I this question always reminds me of when Robin Williams talks about, he wanted to go into acting, and of course that wasn't, acting is always like a difficult thing for a parent to be like, sure, yeah, acting is great career. And so he told his parents that, and his dad said, that's fine, but you should get a welding degree just in case. Because acting could work out or not, but you'll always have the welding degree, welding skill to fall back on. And of course, Robin Williams, great Bay Area, artist, the actor. And so I think the key is, and we hire a lot of people early in their career progression, and I think the big thing is like early on finding the things that you like to do. And I don't mean necessarily like you want to be a marine biologist, or you want to be but like figuring out, like, I really love to write, I really love to do math, I really love solving problems and engineer, I really like working with people, that sort of thing. Figuring out what it is that you really love to do, and then finding career paths that allow you to shine and be the best in the world at that. I think that's like the path to finding work that is fulfilling for you long term. I don't know what the future holds for careers. I don't think anybody does. But I know that people are happy when they're doing things that are within their talents. And
Mhm.
and so and we look for people who are a good fit for the talents that they have, and the talents that we're looking for. And so I don't think that's going to change. I think the shape of work will change quite a bit, but I think people following their passions will always be universal. So I don't know. I'd spend time focusing on that, and and if it's something that looks a little questionable, I'd, get a welding degree just in
And
case.
you're right.
Just a
Yeah.
bit.
And you're right. The software developer may not code, but if the person loves creating software and solving problems, anyway, the solving problem part is there and creating software is there. Maybe that's not using this tool or maybe not writing code, but the full passion doesn't go away. So it's still, you have to do it maybe differently. It has been great discussion and conversation with you, Alex. I'm going to ask you the last question. What is a book that you like personally or professionally and you would like to share with the audience?
I actually collect this book, so I have a first copy, first edition
Mhm.
of this book. This is how much I like this book. It's a really old book. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I've read it, I don't know how many times, quite a few times. And every time I read it, I realize that, I could probably read it again. And so could everybody else. It's just such a foundational book on just, treating people the way that you want to be treated and making people feel special. And I think if everybody read that book, the world would be a really, really great place and probably a more peaceful place too. So I'll pitch that one. I also think, when we look at our lives, that's what we're all trying to do is win friends and influence people. And I think it's the best book on the fundamentals of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a great pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. Thanks, Armin.